There's a number that's been sitting quietly in the background of the 2026 World Cup conversation for the past few months, and it deserves more attention than it's received. Airline bookings from Europe to the United States for July 2026 are down 14% compared to the same period last year. Not a marginal dip, not statistical noise, 14% across every major gateway city in Europe: Frankfurt, Barcelona, Amsterdam, Paris, Munich, Athens. The data comes from Cirium, a global aviation analytics firm, and it covers tickets booked through online travel agencies between October 2025 and January 2026. Here's what makes that number particularly striking. The US dollar is down 12% against the euro compared to last year. America is cheaper for Europeans right now than it's been in some time. This should be encouraging travel, not discouraging it. And yet, the bookings are down, significantly, measurably, undeniably down. So the question worth asking, calmly, honestly, without drama, is this: what is happening to European football fans and the 2026 World Cup? And what does it mean for the tournament that the most passionate football-watching continent on Earth appears to be, in meaningful numbers, deciding to stay home? Let's go through it properly, because this story has several layers, and each one is more interesting than the headline version suggests. Begin with what happened last summer. In June and July of 2025, the FIFA Club World Cup was held in the United States. 32 clubs, a new format, a summer tournament designed in part as a dress rehearsal for 2026. And what it revealed was something that should have prompted serious conversation inside FIFA long before now. MetLife Stadium, the same stadium that will host the World Cup final on July 19th, was at 44.9% capacity through 5 first-round matches, less than half full. The cavernous NFL venues FIFA had selected to host the tournament were not drawing the crowds the format demanded. Ticket prices had to be slashed to move inventory. Headline after headline appeared about empty seats and discounted tickets. New Jersey's governor at the time noted that the teams involved were not household names for American audiences, and he was right, to a point. But the Club World Cup also revealed something more structural. In the absence of deep local football culture, in the absence of the passionate traveling supporters that make a World Cup's atmosphere what it is, these giant American venues echo. The World Cup will be different in important ways. The football is categorically more compelling. The stakes are higher. The emotional connection fans have to national teams runs deeper than any club affiliation. And the atmosphere generated by South American fans in particular, the Argentines, the Brazilians, the Colombians, is capable of filling a stadium with noise that no corporate hospitality arrangement can manufacture. But the Club World Cup served as an early warning, and the warning was this: filling 80,000-seat NFL stadiums night after night requires the kind of international fan travel that in 2026 is not arriving in the numbers originally anticipated. Now, let's talk about why European fans specifically are hesitating, because it's not one thing. It's a combination of factors that have accumulated over the past 8 months, each one manageable on its own, but together creating a picture that has shifted the calculation for a significant number of supporters. The first factor is access, and this one is the most concrete. 39 countries currently face some form of U.S. travel restriction or visa complication for this tournament. For fans from those nations, the conversation is not about whether to go, it's about the fact that they can't. Several of those nations have qualified teams: Haiti, Iran, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire. The supporters of those nations who followed their teams through every qualifying match are largely locked out of the American portion of this World Cup. That's not a small thing. That's a fundamental rupture in what a World Cup is supposed to be. For European fans from countries not on that list, the access question is different but still real. The ACLU, Amnesty International, and more than 100 other organizations issued a formal travel advisory earlier this year.
It raised concerns about device searches at U.S. borders, which reached a record high in 2025, about the environment for travelers from communities that have had difficult experiences with enforcement, about uncertainty around what the tournament experience might actually feel like once you're inside the host country. Whether those concerns are proportionate or not is a question reasonable people can debate, but what's not debatable is that the concerns exist, and they are shaping decisions.
Then there's the cost. Football Supporters Europe, the organization that represents fan groups across the continent, described FIFA's ticket pricing for 2026 as a monumental betrayal. Their analysis found that a supporter following their team through the entire tournament, from the first group match to the final, using the official supporter allocation route through national associations, would pay at least $6,900, almost 5 times the equivalent cost at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. 5 times. That figure stops you, because Qatar 2022 was itself criticized for being expensive and inaccessible. If 2026 is 5 times more expensive than that, you are talking about a tournament that has placed itself beyond the financial reach of the vast majority of the people who love the sport most deeply. The fan most likely to travel to a World Cup from Europe is not a millionaire. They're a person who has been saving for years, who books the cheapest flights, stays in a shared apartment, eats street food between matches, and spends every penny of their holiday budget on being there because being there is what matters. That fan, the one who painted their face for the 1990 quarterfinal in Italy, who was in the streets of Paris in 1998, who stood in the Dortmund fan zone in 2006 and watched Germany play through tears of joy, that fan is the one FIFA's pricing has moved out of reach. Sports historian David Goldblatt, speaking to CNN earlier this year, said what many people were thinking but few were saying publicly. He said he thought what we would probably end up seeing is a World Cup for the 1%. He said there are lots of very wealthy people in the United States and lots of folks who have never been to a football match but are there because it feels like going to the Super Bowl or a show on Broadway. And then he said something that lands harder than anything else. He thought it would probably be a very white audience as a consequence. That observation, made carefully by a credible historian, published in a mainstream outlet, is the thing that gets under the skin of anyone who has loved this game for a long time. Because the World Cup has always drawn its energy from the diversity of the people in those stadiums. The noise that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck at a World Cup is not manufactured. It comes from the fan in the yellow shirt who flew 30 hours to be there, from the supporter who brought a drum and a flag and a song that the whole section eventually learns, from the mixing of colors and languages and football cultures that makes the tournament unlike any other event in sport. If what replaces that is wealthy American spectators treating the World Cup like a prestige entertainment event, the soul of the thing changes. Not immediately, not completely, but it changes. Now, let's be honest about what the picture actually shows, because it's not uniformly negative and it would be wrong to present it that way. South American fan travel for 2026 is tracking essentially flat compared to previous tournaments. That is genuinely encouraging. Argentine fans, Brazilian fans, Colombian fans, communities with large diasporas already living in the United States are expected to bring the same extraordinary energy they've brought to every World Cup for decades. The Argentine supporters who turned stadiums in Qatar into something resembling a Buenos Aires night are capable of doing the same thing in Dallas or New York. That energy is real and it will be there. The fan festivals, the free public viewing events planned across all 16 host cities, are expected to draw enormous crowds. Mexico City's Zocalo, one of the largest public squares in the world, is preparing for 80,000 fans at a time during major matches. Toronto's waterfront, Vancouver's English Bay. These spaces will be alive with football. They always are. And for fans who can't afford a ticket or can't get a visa, the Fan Festival is where the World Cup actually lives.
Mexico's 3 host cities are drawing real and growing interest from fans across Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East who find the U.S. portion of the tournament inaccessible or uncomfortable. Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Monterrey are open to the world in a way that several of the American cities are not. The visa flexibility, the cultural warmth, and the football identity of those three cities mean that the Mexican portion of this World Cup may well produce the most authentic and globally representative atmosphere of the entire tournament. Canada's cities are doing something genuinely interesting. Toronto, hosting 6 matches, including Canada's home opener against Bosnia, has built a tournament identity around the phrase, "the world in a city." It's not a marketing slogan, it's a factual description. Nearly every competing nation has a significant diaspora community within reach of BMO Field. When Canada plays Qatar in Vancouver's BC Place, with the mountains visible behind the stadium, the crowd will be unlike any other. Not because it will be the loudest, but because it will represent something about what football actually is, a game that crossed every border before borders were thought of as the important thing. The question this all raises, and it's one that will outlast this tournament, is whether FIFA's commercial decisions for 2026 have permanently altered the character of what a World Cup crowd looks and sounds like. Because it's not just about this summer, it's about precedent. The pricing model applied in 2026, if it becomes the template, changes the fan base that attends these tournaments. Gradually, over successive editions, the people in the stands shift, the atmosphere shifts, and eventually the thing that made the World Cup, the democratic, global, chaotic, beautiful congregation of football people from everywhere, becomes something more curated, more managed, and more expensive. Alan Rothenberg, the man who organized the 1994 World Cup in the United States and still holds the all-time attendance record with 3.5 million spectators, was asked about the boycott conversation earlier this year. He's a measured, experienced voice on exactly this subject, someone who knows both what the World Cup can be in America and what boycotts look like in practice. His view was that a formal team boycott is extremely unlikely to happen. FIFA's rules make it almost structurally impossible for a major federation to withdraw without severe consequences, and he's right about that. But the fan-level equivalent of a boycott, the quiet, individual decision made by hundreds of thousands of supporters across Europe not to book a flight, not to buy a ticket, not to make the journey, that is already happening. It's in the airline data. It's in the hotel booking numbers from cities like Seattle, where international visitor projections are running 17% below expectations. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't have a name or a hashtag that lasts. It's just a decision made at a kitchen table somewhere in Frankfurt or Amsterdam or Barcelona, and added up across a continent, it becomes a 14% drop in transatlantic bookings. Whether that number grows, holds, or begins to reverse as the tournament approaches and the football takes hold, that's the question hanging over the next 19 days. Because the World Cup has a way of pulling people toward it even when their heads are telling them to stay. The draw of the tournament is real and ancient. It doesn't require a reason, it just requires the whistle to blow. What does this story mean for you if you've been watching football for most of your adult life? I think it means something simple and important. The game belongs to the people who love it, not to governing bodies, not to pricing models, not to any single host nation's policies. And the moments when that ownership feels threatened, when the mechanisms that were supposed to serve football start to look like they're serving something else, those are the moments when real football people speak up. The European fans who are staying home this summer are speaking up, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that matters most, which is with their choices. Would this change how you think about following the tournament from home? Are you one of the supporters who made the decision not to go after wanting to for years? I'd genuinely like to hear your story. Leave it in the comments. Those are the accounts that tell this tournament's real history. If this kind of football journalism is worth your time, a like helps reach more people who care about the game at this level. Subscribe if you want to follow the full story of this tournament, from the opening ceremony in Mexico City on July 11th all the way to July 19th. We'll be here for all of it. Football at this scale is never just a tournament, it's a moment in time, and 2026 is going to be one of them.